This presentation provides guidance and training for LEAs completing the ESSA Consolidated Private Nonprofit Equitable Services PR3099 Compliance Report Self-Check. This presentation is intended to solely provide general information and guidance to Texas school systems, ESCs, nonprofit subgrantees, and participating private schools receiving equitable services. The content in this presentation reflects the Texas Education Agency's current understanding of statute and applicable federal guidance. The content of this presentation is subject to change as a result of future guidance and/or other updates provided by federal agencies with regulatory oversight of these programs. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and entities are therefore advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting upon the information. Artificial intelligence disclaimer. Recording or use of artificial intelligence, the Texas Education Agency does not permit third-party recording or the use of AI summary services during its grants-related trainings. Attendees of TEA's grants-related trainings may not use AI services, language models, applications, interfaces, or assistants to attend, review, or record the trainings. TEA further prohibits any person or entity from using the information included in its grant-related trainings who violate this prohibition may be removed from the trainings and may be barred from attending future grants-related training opportunities. PR 3099 Private Nonprofit School Equitable Services LEA Compliance Report. This is the 2024-25 Compliance Report Calendar. As you can see, the ESSA Consolidated Compliance Report will open July 29th of this year, and it will be due September 30th of this year. This is a screenshot of the eGrant system. The LEA can click on the compliance reports to access the PR 3099 Private Nonprofit Schedule. The compliance report may be found in the eGrant system under the Grants, Resources, and Table of Contents. Within the eGrant system, an LEA can view and print error and warning messages. The Program Self-Check Items section of the compliance reports format has been changed for fiscal agents only. For each program self-check item, the LEA or fiscal agent is required to self-report program requirement compliance as an independent LEA or as a fiscal agent to include compliance of the members of the Shared Services Arrangement or the SSA. What is meant by in compliance? It means the LEA or fiscal agent assures that it has the strongest documentation recommended, readily available as evidence that the requirement was met in that current reporting year, or the LEA or fiscal agent has other documentation that potentially might show compliance. In the event of an audit, TEA or audit staff would make the final determination concerning whether the documentation is sufficient to demonstrate compliance with the program requirement. For fiscal agents, the in compliance reporting assures that it has documentation for all members of its SSA. What is meant by not in compliance? It means the LEA does not have the strongest documentation recommended readily available as evidence that the requirement was met in the reporting year. Also, the LEA describes the plan to meet compliance the following year. For fiscal agents reporting not in compliance, it means that one or more SSA members are out of compliance. The fiscal agent will be required to provide a list of SSA members that are out of compliance. This is not enabled for LEAs. What is meant by not applicable? This option only displays when a requirement may have a circumstance that is identified by TEA as not applicable. The LEA or fiscal agent assures that only the listed reasons apply. No other reason is acceptable. There are several reminders for LEAs regarding the PNP compliance report. Documenting overall compliance for a program requirement may require several forms of documentation to be maintained locally and available upon request by TEA and/or an auditor. The compliance items listed are a selection of program compliance requirements for compliance reporting purposes and not an all-inclusive listing of all the requirements for the program. For a complete listing of program compliance requirements, please see the ESSA Program Specific and ESSA Provision Assurances. Additional guidance concerning program requirements may be found in the program guide as well as the PNP Frequently Asked Questions document. Now, the presentation will move through three parts of the PNP Compliance Report. Part 1, Private Nonprofit Program Participation. Part 2, Program Compliance Self-Check. And Part 3, the additional information that is optional. Much of the PNP data that was previously collected on the PR3099 is now collected through the FPC PNP Affirmations Smartsheet Work app. To reduce duplication of data, LEAs will not submit that data also through the PR3099 compliance report. LEAs with participating private schools must ensure the PNP affirmation that is submitted through the Work app is accurate and/or revised to reflect accurate data no later than the ESSA Consolidated Grant application's final amendment date, typically early in June of that current school year. Data reported in the Smartsheet system must match data that is pre-populated in the PR3099 Parts 1A and 1B. If there are changes to the original submitted affirmation data, the LEA must correct it. The PNP affirmations data and compliance report data must match. On Part 1A, the radio buttons will be pre-populated with the district's TEA approved Consolidated Federal Grant Applications data on the PS 3099 Private School Schedule. If there was a change in the number of PNP schools participating per program by year end and not reflected in the final TEA approved Consolidated Federal Grant Applications data on the PS 3099 private school schedule, a response is required on the compliance report under the applicable programs. Part B, the radio buttons will be pre-populated with the district's TEA approved consolidated federal grant applications data that was submitted on the PS 3099 private school application schedule. If there was a change in the number of PNP schools participating per program by year end and not reflected in the final TEA approved consolidated federal grant applications data on the PS 3099 application schedule, there must be a response for each of the programs. As you can see here, we have the Title I Part A, Title I Part C migrant, Part Title II Part A, Title III Part A, and Title IV Part A. An explanation must be submitted if there was a change. Data on the PR 3099 must match submitted PNP affirmations Smart Sheet work app data. The total number of participating private nonprofit schools, the total number of programs in which PNP schools participated, and the total number of signed and submitted PNP affirmations for participating schools. If there is a mismatch in data, LEAs must submit an FPC help desk form and request revisions to ensure the PNP affirmation Smartsheet WorkApp data is aligned with the PR 3099 compliance report data. This could be revising a submitted PNP affirmation for a school that declined or never responded for services, or a private school that intended to participate and the district was going to have services. However, they waited until the second semester and then declined those services. For any of those reasons and more, the LEA must submit an FPC help desk form to request revisions to that PNP affirmations workup data. Part 2 is the program compliance self-check portion of the compliance report. The LEA will complete this section to indicate compliance with each requirement. For this year, there were 4 program compliance self-check items selected in which the LEA must submit data. Number 1, timely and meaningful consultation. Number 2, the LEA maintain control of PNP inventory, technology, equipment, and supplies. Number 3, the LEA maintain documentation of equitable services amounts. And number 4, the LEA had documentation of equitable services administration amounts. For program requirement 1, in each of the titles, Title I Part A, 1 Part C, Title II Part A, Title III, and Title IV Part A, if the LEA did conduct timely and meaningful consultation with participating PNP school officials and they have documentation that that was ongoing, the LEA would check yes, that they are in compliance. And there is documentation to support that they are in compliance and readily available upon request by TEA and an auditor. If no is selected for any of the programs, the district must write in the space below to describe how it plans to meet compliance the following year. The LEA for Compliance Requirement 2 had procedures in place ensuring that it maintained control of PNP inventory and supplies purchased for the Equitable Services programs. If the compliance status is yes, the LEA assures it has documentation showing compliance readily available and upon request. Some of the strongest documentation recommended would be LEA procedures that ensured it maintained control of technology, equipment, and supplies purchased for the PNP schools' equitable services programs, and it must include a copy of the written policies and procedures regarding the purchases of PNP technology, equipment, and supplies for equitable services. This must be in place regardless of if the LEA is actually making those purchases for equitable services. It still must have a written policy and procedures in place for the private nonprofit schools. It must also have at least one sample of dated agendas, consultation notes, and other documentation specifying that the LEA maintained control of those PMP purchases for equitable services. And it must also have documentation to state that there is an inventory list of items purchased for the private school on at least one participating private school campus for each participating program. So, for example, if the private school did participate in programs Title I Part A and Title I Part C, then it must have an inventory list if any supplies, materials, devices were purchased for the use of the program. It must have that inventory list that would be available in the event of an audit. For Title I Part A, if the district was in compliance of all four of these items, then it would use the space, it would select yes. If it was not in compliance, then it would select no and describe how it plans to meet compliance the following year. A screenshot shows you the part two program requirement continuing about the LEA maintaining control of PMP inventory and supplies purchased for the equitable services programs. And the LEA would indicate if it was in compliance for all of the programs listed, it would select yes. If it was not, it would select no. And if it selected no, that it was not in compliance, it must type in the space below to state how it plans to meet compliance the following year. Program Compliance Requirement 3. The LEA documented the equitable services amounts used and provided a detailed explanation of the equitable services amounts provided to private nonprofit officials for all applicable participating programs. If compliance has been met for the Title I Part A program, click Yes to indicate the LEA complied with this requirement for each applicable program. By selecting Yes, the LEA assures that it has documentation showing compliance readily available upon request by TEA and/or an auditor. Examples of the strongest documentation recommended for this requirement are documentation LEA informed the PMP school officials of fiscal requirements that include equitable service amounts for one private school campus. For example, agenda, meeting minutes, LEA program summaries, timeline of professional development travel and PNP purchase requests, calendar of program services with equitable services amounts, or other documentation meeting requirement, or documentation and LEA shared calculated equitable service amounts by program for one PMP school campus. For example, LEA calculations by PMP campus and program level, calculation formulas per PNP campus, etc., or written procedures and documentation that provided verification or tracked LEA PNP inventory purchases that include equitable services amounts for one private school campus. The LEA may have other documentation that might potentially show compliance. In the event of an audit, TEA or audit staff would make the final determination concerning whether the documentation is sufficient to demonstrate compliance with the program requirement. If no is selected, use the space provided to describe how the LEA plans to meet compliance the following year. For the Program Compliance Requirement 3 of equitable service amounts being used, the LEA would indicate if it used equitable services, it would indicate yes, that it has documentation to support in the event of a compliance or an audit by TEA. If it was not in compliance, it would select no, and then it would need to indicate how it plans to meet compliance the following year. Continuing on with requirement 3, for the Title IV Part A program, the LEA would need to document yes or no if it was in compliance with the equitable services amounts used, if it had documentation to support that. If it did not, then it would select no and enter into the comment box how it plans to meet compliance the following year. For the program requirement number 4, equitable services administration amounts, the LEA must have documented that equitable services administration amounts were used and provided a written explanation to all applicable participating private school officials. If the compliance has met for the program, it would select yes. If it does not have compliance that has been met, it would select no on the programs on the following slides. If compliance is yes, it actually assures that documentation exists and it is readily available for the strongest documentation recommended. Documentation, LEA informed the PNP officials during consultations of equitable services administration amounts and how it was used. For example, the amount or the percentage of private nonprofit equitable service funds that were appropriated for each item, the agenda, meeting minutes, third party or shared service agreements, calculated campus spreadsheets for the private schools that are actually indicating what the administration amounts are. That information must be shared with the private schools if there is administration costs that is used. The LEA may have other documentation that potentially might show compliance. In the event of an audit, TEA or audit staff would make the final determination concerning whether the documentation is sufficient to demonstrate compliance with the program requirement or not. If not applicable, the LEA assures that the following reason applies. No other reason is acceptable. The LEA would select not applicable because the LEA did not use any funding for administrative costs in any of the programs. The program compliance requirement of number 4, which was the equitable services administration amount being used, if compliance has been met for any of the programs, the LEA would click yes to indicate it complied with the requirement for each of the applicable programs. By selecting yes, the LEA assures it has documentation showing compliance readily available upon request by TEA and/or an auditor. In addition, if the compliance status is yes, The LEA has that information, that documentation readily available. If no is selected, the LEA must use the space below of the applicable program to type how it plans to meet compliance the following year. If an LEA did not use any administrative amounts for equitable services in any of the applicable programs, the LEA should click Not Applicable. The LEA did not use funds for administration costs. That is the only reason when an LEA should select the NA button. For Part 3, LEAs may type any additional information that is applicable to the PR3099 PNP Equitable Services Compliance Report in the comment box below, if desired. For assistance. The PR3099 PNP Compliance Report resources are Schedule Mockup, Program Compliance Self-Check Guide, Instructions Document, and Instructions Video. PR3099 PNP Equitable Services Compliance Report resources may be located on the TEA webpage under Federal Program Compliance Division. On the ESSA Consolidated Compliance Reports resources page, an LEA can find a PDF copy of the PNP Compliance Report, the PR3099 Schedule Mockup, Compliance Report Instructions, and the instructional video. LEAs may reach out to their local ESC staff who are available to provide technical assistance and support prior to submission of the PNP compliance report. ESC staff are also available to provide technical assistance to any LEA that reported not in compliance for any of the compliance self-check items. The purpose of the technical assistance would be to assist the LEA in meeting compliance the following year. LEAs may also reach out to the private nonprofit ombudsman for support with the compliance report. The PNP Ombudsman Program contact information is shown. Feel free to reach out if there are questions. Thank you for attending this presentation.